This is Desaliny. Something kind of snuck up on me while I was doing some research for a different video, and I had to kind of drop everything and record this video for you because today happens to be a birthday of an album. That album is Mission of Burma, their debut album from 1982, Versus. It is 40 years old today, released on the 11th of October, 1982. Yeah, a great album. Mission of Burma were part of a US kind of scene at the time that were, whilst hardcore punk was kind of raging, there were a lot of other kind of bands dotted around in pockets around the country doing their own kind of post-punk thing. So this would be kind of, artier, weirder, slightly more complex bands, not doing the kind of the chugga-chugga, fast, hard punk rock thing. So, in New York City, you had, a whole wave of bands that were kind of grouped under the idea of no wave, DNA, Mars, Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, the Contortions, Bush Tetras, harsh, discordant, edgy bands. In Athens, Georgia, you had kind of bands like the B-52s, Pylon, the Method Actors, kind of weird, funky, slightly danceable, twitchy kind of bands. In California, all sorts of weirdness was happening in their kind of weird post-punk scene. Bands like Chrome, The Residents, Tuxedo Moon, Devo even, possibly, if you want to count them as post-punk rather than new wave. And in the Pacific Northwest as well, you had a band called Wipers, who were kind of like doing a punk rock thing, but kind of rebuilding it from the ground up. Very cool band indeed. And the band who made this album, Mission of Burma, from Boston. Yeah, a really great kind of unsung post-punk band of the kind of the late 70s, early 80s period. So Mission of Burma was Roger Miller, Clint Conley, Peter Prescott and Martin Swope on tape loops. They were around for a very short period, 1979 to 1983 initially. And this, Versus, was their only album released during that very short run. They did reform almost 20 years later. I think it was 2002, where they basically just found a complete second life. And they recorded a string of albums, 4 of them in total, which I think are as good, probably even better than the stuff they were recording in their original incarnation. Just an incredible kind of story, really, to just take a 20-year gap, come back and casually just like go, by the way, did you forget about us? Just great stuff. I was lucky enough to see them at the All Tomorrow's Parties Festival, curated by Shellac in 2002. Just a revelation, just a brilliant band. Bob Weston, by the way, of Shellac, was taking Martin Swope's role on tape loops for these concerts. So yeah, back to their original kind of incarnation. Yeah, just a classic case of just a great band, the right band at just the wrong time. Literally, by the time they split, 82, 83, due to various issues, one of them being Roger Miller's hearing. He was having hearing trouble. Yeah, this kind of the hardcore indie underground kind of network hadn't really gelled, hadn't really formed. So all the kind of the great, underground noise rock bands of the mid to late 80s who could take advantage of that by, 85, 86, 87, could play shows, could kind of tour the country. None of that was available to Mission of Burma, and it just kind of seemed to hold them back and stymie them, and they just fell apart. But anyway, back to the birthday boy. Yeah, and Versus. This is the CD reissue on Rykodisc from 1988. Sound-wise, it owes a very definite kind of debt to some of the UK post-punk of the late 70s. So you get some of that kind of distance and the kind of the chilliness and the atmosphere of bands like Joy Division and Pill, but you also get some of the kind of the weird kind of rhythmic clipped kind of funkiness of bands like Gang of Four. But at the same time, there's also this real strand of them kind of referencing some of the more adventurous post-punk bands of the US. So bands like Pere Ubu, and also some of the kind of the new wave bands that were kind of more tricksy and interesting, like Television or even Talking Heads. And you also get this kind of punky menace, the unpredictability, the artiness of some of the kind of the pre-punk kind of garage punk kind of bands. So you get lots of kind of Stooges, Velvet Underground, even kind of some of like the early kind of Roxy music, who were quite odd. You get a lot of these kind of influences mashing together in Mission of Burma, and mashing together in a fantastic way. Yeah, back to Versus. Key tracks, I mean, it's chock full of them. Trem too has this kind of cold, pulsing, very simple guitar thing, which has a tremolo synced to the tempo of the song, gives it a very odd feel, this rising and falling thing. It's got a very dark, kind of tense, shadowy Joy Division kind of feel. Whereas New Nails is much more kind of chattering and jittery, and it kind of does this kind of more streamlined take on the kind of the freeform kind of post-punk soundscapes of bands like Pere Ubu, definitely. Yeah, there were two songwriters in the band. Roger Miller wrote the majority of stuff, but Clint Conley made some amazing contributions. His song on this album, Micah, it's got this amazing kind of juddering, kind of stop-start, almost Morse code kind of type riff. Just a fantastic song. It got great lyrics too. He sings, "I'd be a mineral deposit, a ball of mica inside a rock. Then there'd be no whistles, no radio, no screens." It's really cool stuff. A track like Weatherbox as well. Conley's bass lines, this mazy bass line, holds everything down while Roger Miller just sprays these kind of guitar shapes all over it. Another really great song. And then towards the end of the album, you get That's How I Escape My Certain Fate. This is kind of punkier, more raw Burma. It's like a hollowing kind of sing-along classic. It's weird. It sounds like if you could imagine Paul McCartney fronting the Ramones. Amazingly catchy. Really cool music. Yeah, if you get a CD reissue of this album, you will inevitably get some of the other material of the period packaged along with it. So you'll get the Signals, Calls and Marches EP and possibly one or two of the other singles. These contain some of their greatest songs. So yeah, get Verses in that format and you'll get some amazing songs as well. I'm talking things like That's When I Reach for My Revolver, covered by too many people to mention. You get Academy Fight Song, very famously covered by R.E.M. live and as one of their kind of fan club singles, I believe. You get tracks like This Is Not a Photograph, which is gave the title of the documentary film, which was made around about the time of the band's reunion. Really worth watching. And tracks like All World Cowboy Romance as well. This is great because and this is another reason to watch This Is Not a Photograph, but on their very first of the live shows that they were performing during the reunion period, 2002, 2003, they were joined on stage by countless kind of indie rock legends to play additional guitar on this song, usually as an encore. You would get Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth, Lee Ronaldo, Ira Kaplan of Yola Tango, Moby joined them, Richard Bally of Versus. It just shows the kind of the fondness and the influence that they kind of held within this group, within the kind of the indie rock kind of pantheon of late 80s, early 90s American musicians. Mission of Burma are one of the great kind of unsung bands of that period, definitely. And while I'm here wishing Versus a very happy birthday, it would be remiss of me not to point out that the Reunion records, a run of 4 albums from about 2003 onwards, are, if anything, as good as, possibly even better than some of the stuff they released in their first incarnation. I would probably, if I was going to suggest you go for anything, go for the album The Obliterati from 2006. I think that may well be just the greatest thing they've ever recorded. It's a fantastic record. Anyway, that will do for now. I didn't want to go on too much, but at the same time, I think Versus is an album that really deserves celebration on the 40th anniversary of its release. So yeah, quick video. I'll have more up soon. In the meantime, go and find Versus. Give it a listen. And I'll see you very shortly. Bye for now.